Good afternoon. I'm Matt Driskill, editor of Asian Aviation Magazine and AsianAviation.com. Welcome to the latest In Conversation, Take Two, sponsored by Metrojet of Hong Kong. Today we're speaking with Jean-Pierre Clercin. He's the head of commercial for Asia-Pacific at regional plane maker ATR. Jean-Pierre, welcome to In Conversation. Thanks for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me, Matt, and great to be here.
Yeah, we had a little technical difficulty, so we're on take two right now, and that might have been operator error. That might have been my fault, but we're going to blame the computer. Easier to do that. Anyway, last year was a tough year for everybody in aviation. Deliveries were down, customers were deferring orders, no one was flying, pretty much internationally especially. This year started out rough. Things seem to be looking up a little bit. How have you at ATR dealt with the pandemic here in Asia Pacific? And talk to us. I know there were some changes with the few deliveries that ATR made last year.
Yes, indeed. Actually, I think the point this year for last year and for us was to support the customer, right? And make sure that they were as successful as possible given the context. The first part was, of course, support. Making sure that they were keep flying as much as they could. And the other one, as you said, right, was deliveries. It was a funky year, to be able to get around, right? So one of the interesting endeavors we had was to, instead of delivering aircraft in Toulouse, as we usually do so, in the home country of some of our customers, like, Mandarin, not to name them. And it was interesting because, it was a new thing for us. And I brought a lot of questions and it was fascinating, really. How everybody worked together, to make that happen. But really, I think at the end, the question for us, it's how do we actually, help our customer, maximize the opportunities that are out there, right? Because it was a tough year, but I think, there was opportunities. And so we've been working very hard in enabling people to operate cargo. We've been also looking at operators acquiring, I would say, new market shares, from the bus, for instance, in Nepal, where people, just prefer to be 45 minutes in the plane rather than 6 hours on the bus. And so I think that was actually, our game here was to support that. And so I think, last year was more than a survival year actually for customers and ATR, because we saw 10 new operators, we saw 84 new routes, and given the context, I think it's quite an achievement. And so I was, I think, this quotation from this quote actually from again, I think it's an American president. I need to check my sources here, but it was saying that, the great nations are forged in the furnace of adversity, which sounds very with a lot of gravitas, but really says that, in the worst situation, are opportunities to be better and get better.
Well, and as we talked about before, you never let a good crisis go to waste, and I mentioned Rex. They're taking advantage of the crisis and all of that. Anyway, ATR partnership, Airbus, Leonardo, you had discussed with technically a competitor of mine, but you said, I can't talk about anything till Leonardo comes out with their results. But they mentioned on the 10th of March, they expect to deliver about 20 aircraft this year. Any of those set for Asia? And I think you mentioned also that there were 5 that you delivered to Asia last year.
Yes, indeed, actually. So with 5 aircraft actually last year, from the key markets, Taiwan, Japan, and New Zealand. And we will actually continue, I would say, delivering in 2021 to the active markets mainly, actually, which is South Asia, North Asia, at large are doing pretty well. I think, in South Asia has been very, I would say, bouncing back very strongly, from the COVID crisis in terms of traffic. North Asia has been very resilient. I think the government have done a great job there, actually, maintaining the COVID out. And then the Pacific as well has been also, quite an interesting fit. Although with sometimes, ups and downs, like everybody. And so we're targeting basically to deliver, to about 5 different operators this year in Asia.
I'm curious, you mentioned South Asia. I used to live in Sri Lanka. I worked in India quite a bit. I've never been to Pakistan. I won't say anything about the country. India is one of my favorite places. I didn't realize South Asia is a strong market for you?
Yes, actually, we have a lot of, 2 main operators there, actually, with Indigo and Air India, Alliance Air, which is the regional, actually, venture. And so, yes, it's a very important market for us. And, the UDAN scheme basically there has actually been sustaining a lot, the growth of regional aviation. So it's a very important market with a lot of potential as well, actually.
Yeah, I just did an interview with a couple of gentlemen from India the other day. I mean, it's one of my favorite countries. I love going there. You just have to embrace the chaos a little bit. So it's a lot of fun.
It's fascinating. I think it's a fascinating place, actually.
Yeah, and the UDAN scheme is interesting to see, especially for someone like you, for the regional operators.
Yeah. No, it is. I think there's a lot of energy there. I mean, there's a lot of growth. I think people are very optimistic about, the future. And I think UDAN has been actually a great facilitator, actually, of, development of regional aviation there, right? So it has been more a catalyst for anything else, because I think the underlying roots, actually, or basis, actually, of the markets are very healthy, because, I mean, you have a growing, middle class, you have needs to go faster and connect with secondary and tertiary cities. So it's a great, actually, story there.
Yeah, interesting. Leonardo, back to their results, they said the backlog was about 176 aircraft, but they also talked about pre-owned planes that have come onto the market after some smaller carriers shut down. And again, we talked about this a little bit. Sometimes this, with deferrals and with people changing their minds and all of that, sometimes that leads to some difficult conversations. Sounds like some of the conversations I had with my father growing up, but that's one of those things. But you also said that ultimately ATR recognizes that you're part of the broader ecosystem, and that I've seen that a lot over the past year when I've talked to lessors. I think the only one that doesn't agree with that is probably Mr. Al-Bakar of Qatar. Because he doesn't like difficult conversations. He says, do it my way or else. But ATR, you're sort of saying, yeah, we've got to work with people.
Yeah, I mean, I think, in aviation, I mean, all our destinies are intertwined, right? So I think it's a small ecosystem for one, actually, but I think we all are dependent on that. And I think, we need to recognize at the end of the day that we are serving customers who are themselves serving, communities, right? And I think the best gauge actually for success for us is the success of our customers. And we're nothing without them, right? And we're nothing without that success. And so this is where I think, we need to be looking at that as a broader perspective, I guess. And that's where I was kind of getting at on the ecosystem. But, I think on the broader perspective, right, I mean, there is a strong demand, right, on regional mobility, because it's, again, very essential, actually, by nature, right? Because, again, you're connecting secondary city, tertiary city, the guy that goes to the hospital, the bank, the university. And so there is an infrastructure perspective, to those services. And the second-hand, actually, aircraft actually have been a great opportunity for us, because they have been actually allowing us to actually develop new markets. We had 10 new operators, actually, as mentioned earlier on last year. And those were actually, mainly driven by those kind of things, right? And so it's a great vector for us to support growth and market penetration. And we saw, actually, as a matter of fact, a reduction of the stock of second-hand aircraft at about 25% over the last few months.
Great. Competition. Bombardier seems to be getting out of the business a little bit. I think they're actually just focused now on business jets. De Havilland Canada said they were pausing production of the Dash 8 400. I mean, do you see the competition falling away? Is this a good opportunity for ATR here?
I think the crisis has been tough on the industry, right? I think, we had customers that, closed down shop, I think all of us know people in the aviation world that lost their jobs. So it's a difficult thing, right? I think it's been, I don't think there's been any crisis. I mean, people were talking about 2001 or 2009. I mean, to be honest, I think this is an existential crisis for aviation, right? And I think we need to bounce back from that collectively. But to come back to the market, I think, the regional mobility actually remains very strong and very essential. I mean, for the all around, and to sustain that, actually, I think, in this context where, traffic has gone down, where actually airlines need to mitigate the risk. What they need is assets that are actually, supporting, very low cost per trip, a very low risk, actually, in terms of, operating routes. And in that sense, actually, the ATR, because of its lowest cost per trip, is a very strong asset. I mean, to mitigate the risk of our customers.
Still in the competition, and I thought this was interesting. I mean, I've got good relationship with Embraer. They've invited me to Brazil a couple of times, but I've never been. Well, but I've never been able to go. It's always been the wrong time of the year or something. I'd love to go. But they're actually talking about developing some turboprops, one for about 90 passengers, another one for about 70 passengers, 1,000 nautical mile range. That kind of seems like your market right there. Are you worried about them coming into the market, coming into your market?
You know, as we talked, I mean, for the last few questions, I mean, the turboprop market is very resilient, right? I think it's a very strong market, and I think it's normal that it attracts interest, I mean, for different parties, and that's probably a token to its attractiveness, right? But I think the ATR has a very, very effective design, actually, you know, as it is. It's very light, it's very frugal, and, you know, we've had actually, I mean, 200 operators actually, I mean, choosing the ATR so far in 100 countries. And so we have all this community basically vouching for us, right? And this is a very, very strong footprint, you know, from a customer support perspective, from actually, you know, again, that ecosystem, right? That's why I think it's so important for us. And I think the aircraft the competition is pitching today, I mean, doesn't really offer a step change, you know, in technology. It's very similar to what actually we're offering. And the ATR is proven. I mean, it's well adopted. It's available today. And as a matter of fact, we keep investing and improving the platform, right? So
no worries.
Never be complacent.
All right.
But yeah.
Je comprends. Jean-Pierre, we need to take a quick break here to hear from our sponsor, Metrojet of Hong Kong. We'll be right back after this.
We're going to have the crown jewels of Asia, and I promise you we're going to have the nicest and busiest business aviation hangar in the region.
And we're back. We're talking with Jean-Pierre Clercin. Hope I pronounced that right. Head of commercial for AsiaPacific at ATR. In take one, we'd actually talked a little bit about cargo, but now we're in take two, so we're going to talk about it again. We all know cargo has been actually one of the bright spots in the worldwide aviation industry, and that seems true for ATR as well. FedEx has ordered 30 of the new freighters. I think it took its first one last year. So is cargo going to be a huge new area for ATR?
The cargo has always been actually, I mean, a love story for ATR. I mean, there's an interesting story actually that I was told and explained at the early age is that it's time at ATR. That, you know, when the preliminary design actually was all right on the ATR, I mean, one of the owners or the first boss of FedEx had a look at the aircraft and gave his feedback. And he said, you know, guys, if you bring 1 inch more actually on the floor plan, actually, I mean, as a width, you'll be able to load an LD3 pallet actually on the aircraft. And the guys did just that. And here we are actually, I mean, you know, I mean, enjoying this kind of position, you know, with a large cargo door where you can put actually an LD3, pallet on the container in the aircraft, and where FedEx actually is a strong adopter of our aircraft. And so I think, you know, I mean, yes, the ATR is very well designed for that. And I think the technology and I would say the merits of the aircraft allows us, you know, I mean, to touch new markets, you know, give a quick access, you know, I mean, to smaller communities. And offer granularity in the distribution system, you know, of e-commerce platform, of logistic players or courier companies, right? And the crisis has been an amazing, I think, you know, is providing an amazing shift in that, right? I think, I don't know what's your experience, and now maybe to the contrary of you, I mean, apparently, I mean, I'm not always a technology early adopter, In the 90s, I was seeing that took me late 90s to get an email, for instance. But during this last few months, Amazon, Lazada, I have accounts on all these guys, right? And I think a lot of people have converted to the e-commerce, and this is basically driving a lot of demand on the market. The belly space has disappeared, so a lot of people are looking at an opportunity. Again, logistic companies are very actually wondering how they're going to be managing their needs, right? And so yes, we talked about FedEx or Cebu, for instance, when it comes to the large cargo doors, doing cargo operations. But we had also people doing bulk loading like Fiji, or people using seats, seat packs, basically surfing on that wave.
Well, I was going to ask you about going green, but I want to follow up on that, because actually the ATR I flew on was flown by Cebu. Great airline, a lot of fun. Boeing came out recently, talked about Southeast Asia being a top market for them, but it seems like ATR is a perfect fit for the Philippines, for Indonesia. You had talked about Japan, you talked about India as well, but to me, Southeast Asia seems like a perfect market. Cambodia, Vietnam. I see people like Vietjet, buying a lot of jets, but seems like there could be a lot of market there for an ATR. Is that?
No, yes, I think Asia at large, I think, is a great place for us, right? I think there's a few things, right? I would say on one side, archipelagos for sure, right? Because you need to be able to move more point to point. I think infrastructure as well, actually, sometimes is a challenge, right? So and I think, with supporting the development of the economies, you need to be able to bridge those gaps, right? And I think those actually are great opportunities for us. And so really, when you look at, the landscape, we have actually aircraft everywhere, because they are fitted actually, to support all the markets. I think the only place we don't have an aircraft actually in Asia Pac, I think, is probably North Korea.
There's
pretty better like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of things North Korea doesn't have. So anyway, let's go back to talking about going green. Sustainability seems to be a big market for everybody. Sustainable aviation fuel. One of your partners, Airbus, is talking about delivering a hydrogen-powered plane by 2035, I think. I personally have my doubts about that, just because it's not even a moon shot. That's a Mars shot or a Jupiter shot or whatever. Just because you have to change so much of the aviation infrastructure, not just the plane, but the plane is the easy part. It's the engines, it's the airports, it's safety, it's regulatory problems will take forever. But anyway, let's talk about ATR. Talk about going green. What is the company doing? Is this a big area for you?
Well, I think the eco-responsibility is something that has been a very strong message for us for a long while, right? I think the frugality in terms of fuel consumption has been a great asset for ATR. But I think we need to look at it as well as a broader perspective, right? And I think the stall was playing into that actually. So it's about the infrastructure, right? Because when you have a runway, you don't need a highway, right? I think this is a key aspect, because we have to be more responsible at large as a society. And I think the aircraft actually, and the ATR in particular, I think can be a great asset to be actually responsible. And on the aspect of sustainability, I guess I think sometimes we talk about the ecology aspect of it, but I think there are other dimensions. I think we need also sustainability from perspective, right? Communities. The group of people that need to have access, I would say, to social services, being hospitals, banks, and this kind of things. And so again, I think in that perspective, this is one of the strong value we have as a company. And then, of course, sustainability for me, also evokes the aspect of financial sustainability. And I think the merits and the economics and the low cost per trip actually of the ATR are great assets to enable that. And so all those dimensions, I think, get us on these responsible dimensions. Now, I agree, right? The hydrogen. we're working on it. It's a great thing, right? I mean, we can't actually just ignore that, right? But to your point, right? It's years away, right? 20 years away, probably. Sometimes we'll say more than that. I mean, but the reality on the regional market, and I think you had a good comment on that, is that how would you bet actually put hydrogen actually in a small city in PNG actually in even 20 years? I mean, or in Africa, right? And so I think what matters to us actually in terms of the community we're serving is actually what makes sense for them actually. I mean, what they can operate profitably, because the truth is that, this is what's going to drive basically the services and their success. To come back to the ecosystem aspects, is that they need to be successful for us to be, and it's not by imposing a view on this kind of thing that we will be doing that. And I think we need to be open to see and understand what they want.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I want to go back to, and again, I as much as I hate giving my competitor credit, but he's a good guy anyway. And we're talking about Greg Walden. He's a great guy. But you actually told him a story, and I was wondering if you could repeat it here, where you talked about how demand for regional planes could actually benefit people working remotely. I'm sure you've been on countless webinars and Zoom calls and all of this. I know I have, and usually, unfortunately for me, they all happen at 10 o'clock at night when I'm ready to go to bed.
Too late.
Yeah. But, but a lot of people have said, okay, well, 90% of what I do is by email and phone and whatever. But you talked about an executive in Thailand where he could work remotely, but he could take a regional trip to Bangkok or something like that. Can you tell us that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's interesting, and this was something that we've been witnessing actually for the last 9 months. Actually, I mean, when come to June last year, actually, I mean, we started to see more and more actually in the market these things. Until recently, I think until last year, I mean, what I say as a joke is that the COVID was the best actually CTO any company could have, because the truth is that COVID took out a lot of the shackles that company had around actually working and digitalization, because you just had to do that, right? And a lot of people had this issue about work from home, and I mean that was actually a bit taboo. And the fact that we had to send people home for months actually kind of allowed the companies to look at that. And what's fascinating actually is that it's not 1 day per week, or this kind of thing. It's basically you come 2 days a week in the office, and that's fine, right? Which means on the other side, actually, you spend 5 days a week away actually from the city where your office is, right? And that actually kind of opens a realm of new opportunities. I mean, why would you live actually in the place you work if it's expensive, if it's not green, if you don't have space for your kids? I mean, and people are looking for quality of life. And so this is why what we started to see, I mean, that those discussions, I mean, those questions from operators, some new rules being looked at, because they were having like a big growth. And the best token, I mean, we talked about, in France earlier on, but the best token is if you look at real estate price actually in France, from Paris to the province, you see that, there's a strong pressure of people getting away from Paris. And I mean, not saying that 100% will be captured by regional aviation, but I think we can play a role in that.
Well, and as much as I like Provence, I prefer Normandy as well. That's where my wife is from. So and
Normandy's fine too.
Yeah, Normandy's fine. There's some good cheeses, and also the Calvados is pretty good as well. So Jean-Pierre.
Yeah. To push forward, actually, but
ouais, pas de problème. Last question. 2020, terrible year. The word that everybody's been using is unprecedented. 2021 started out rough as well. Tell me what the worst part of the last year was for you, and what are you looking forward to this year?
The last part, I'm gonna reuse some of the stuff I shared with my team actually early in the year. I think, and I don't know what you feel about it and what's your perspective actually on the whole crisis, but I think for the first time in a long while, I think as human beings and as citizens, I think we had the wake up call of nature, right? we are threatened actually by a bug, right? And nowadays, I mean, we don't have any lions roaming around the cities, right? I mean, so being threatened by nature is not something that is very usual, right? And I think it puts things into perspective, right? And maybe also, I mean, kind of understand that, yes, we are just human after all. But past that, I think, I mean, there was the question of health, safety, I mean, for the family, of course, for the teams, and also, for our customers, our ecosystem, right? I mean, I think it's people have died. I mean, people have suffered. I mean, I think we should not forget about that. I think and I'm trying to kind of think back, and I think this was actually something very pregnant. I mean, we were all talking about that. I recall my son saying, "Oh, guys, I have enough of this virus." He's 7 years old. I don't want to talk about this anymore, because all we were doing is talking about the virus, and I think that's tough. And then the worst part from an economical perspective is all those friends and people we know that lost their job, right? I mean, I think it's and the aviation actually being shaken to its core, right? I think it's very sad. And as a manager, I mean, one of the things also that was a bit tough actually was to reconcile a bit, I mean, the conflict in between the request of performance from the team, to support the customer, and the fact that the sheer aspect of the human being having to work from home and having to do homeschooling at the same time and this kind of things in a tense environment, right? So that was not always fun, I would say, put it that way. All in all, I think it's a very humbling things, and I think to the point we discussed, right, it's an opportunity, but we have to look at that, I think, from a lot of humility and see what kind of learnings we can take away. And I'm sure, I mean, as a society and probably as an industry, we will get up better than we enter that. And we just need to be clear about the question and work together as an industry. And for 2021, I mean, I don't know you, but for me, it's getting back on the plane. I just want to travel and avoid 15 days quarantine, actually, to be fair. I think it's, if we've enjoyed actually such an economical growth over the last 60, 70 years, I mean, a lot of such balance in the world, I mean, in terms of peace, we didn't have a major international conflict, right? I mean, worldwide conflict, I would say. I think we have to do it because people were able to see each other, spend time with each other, right? And I think aviation plays a huge role in that. And so we should never underestimate the role we play in this in our world today. And it reminds me this thing. I mean, I was a few months back. I mean, there was this picture by the Sydney airport after they reopened after 6 months. The traffic with New Zealand, and there were pictures of people, family that hadn't seen each other for months, right? And you could see the emotion, the tears, right? And it makes me think. I mean, yes, we can do WebEx, and yes, it's fine. We can work actually, from home, but we need each other, right? We need contact, we need hugs, we need kisses. I don't know. I mean, and so this is what we do, right, as an industry. So, yeah. I mean, I think we need to support the industry getting back on its feet. The recovery, the traveling. I mean, that's what I look forward in 2021.
Great. Jean-Pierre Clercin, head of commercial for Asia Pacific at plane maker ATR. Thanks for joining me in conversation.
Thank you so much, Matt. It was great actually having this chat. Looking forward actually to catch up again.